Welcome to Little Known Black History Facts. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Racist carnival games of the 1930s and the 1940s, when violence and mockery was amusing. At the beginning of the 20th century, traveling carnivals grew out of the World's Fair and became a beloved pastime for families seeking a fun night out that wouldn't leave them broke. Unfortunately, their enjoyable evenings walking the carnival midways was a nightmare for the people working the fair and the animals who had no choice in the matter. From the freak shows to racist games, there was no end to the cruelty that occurred at carnivals in the early 20th century. In the United States, there was a long-time tradition of carnival games, the point of which was to hurt, dehumanize, or denigrate black people. Such games included AFRICANDODGER or bean'em, where a black person would stick their head through a curtain to be pelted with bean bags, eggs, or baseballs. Or the AFRICANDIP, which were dunk tanks that would drop a black person into a tank of water if fairgoers hit a target with a ball. The black man sat perched above a tank of water built to look like a cauldron, and customers paid to throw baseballs at a mechanism that dropped the man into the tank. Over time, the racist overtones were stripped away from the AFRICANDIP midway game and became simply known as the dunk tank. The development of amusement parks on permanent locations increased the popularity of the AFRICANDIP game because it was hard to travel with the cumbersome dunk tank. Riverview Amusement Park in Chicago, Illinois was well known for its popular AFRICANDIP attraction, which was a staple there until the early 1960s. The NAACP had pressured carnival officials to close the game, but the game remained a part of Riverview entertainment. The game ran there for 55 years, from 1909 until 1964. These games were part of a culture of cruelty that made violence and mockery seem mundane and amusing. One of the most popular games at America's traveling circuses and carnivals of the 19th and 20th centuries was the AFRICANDODGER. Hit the coon or hit the nigger baby. The purpose of the game was to hit the target with a ball with one of your 3 throws and win a prize. It sounds like a common carnival target game, but the unsettling part of the game, namely the game's target, was a live human being, a Negro. AFRICANDODGER was a carnival game in which an African American man would stick his head through a canvas curtain and attempt to dodge objects such as eggs or baseballs thrown at his head by players. It was popular in the late 19th and early 20th century despite the obvious brutality of hitting someone in the head with baseballs. The target often suffered serious injuries. The game was played as early as the 1880s and up to the 1950s, and is documented as late as 1965 at a Texas State Fair in Dallas. The game was so popular nationwide that newspapers mentioned the AFRICANDODGER along with trained animals, illusionists, penny arcades, merry-go-rounds, and magic shows in the list of a carnival's attractions. Dodgers made headlines when they were seriously and horrifically injured, otherwise they were nameless victims. The AFRICANDODGER game was widespread in American society, in every part of the country. Smaller kit-based versions of the game were also sold to be played at home. If you could not make it to the fair, you could purchase for 69 cents an AFRICANDODGER table game, which featured a caricatured blackface poking through a canvas reading, "Hit the Dodger, knock him out. Every time you hit Sambo, the bell rings." NBC Radio and Dr. Seuss believed the popular AFRICANDODGER carnival game would be a comedic way to appeal to sell radio spots to advertisers. A 1930s NBC radio print ad illustrated by Dr. Seuss shows a brutal, racist carnival game of Hit the Nigger Baby to sell advertising time. It may be hard to imagine a world where such barbaric games were accepted and played, and to understand why people would allow themselves to be targets. This is another example of the complexities of relationships during the Jim Crow era. The idea that African Americans were subhuman was prevalent and widely accepted. Religious speakers, politicians, and scientists all agreed and believed that the African was a less evolved creature and therefore not subject to humane treatment. Almost everything in American society pointed to a hierarchical structure, whites on top, blacks on the bottom. By the beginning of World War II, the African dip had coalesced into the more familiar dunking booth game, with the black man being replaced by a wisecracking clown. The African Dodger was declared inhumane, but even with the original game thankfully defunct by the late 1940s, some war-weary Southern white people were already pining for the good old days of whizzing baseball at black men's heads. In the 1950s, states began banning dunk tanks. By the late 1950s, racialized carnival games were disappearing, though a small number of carnival operators had target games where wooden Negro heads were used. These wooden heads were used by carnival operators who did not want to offend customers by using actual black people as targets, or who were unable to find black people poor enough and desperate enough to take the jobs. As the civil rights movement gained momentum and the white American public became more aware of the injustices associated with Jim Crow segregation, human target games increasingly grated against public sensibilities. The game's racist past is unknown to most present-day Americans. Until next time, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Press the bell to be notified of future uploads. Thank you for watching.